everyone, and welcome back to Book Talk. I'm Kathy Loken, and today I will be interviewing author and horse veterinarian Elizabeth Woolsey. Elizabeth has been a vet for over 35 years and has 2 award-winning books, Small Town Secrets, and the first book in her series, Travels of Dr. Rebecca Harper. You'll discuss her exciting life as a veterinarian, her books, and her writing process. Let's get into it. All right, Elizabeth. So for the first question, I want to ask you, how many novels have you written in total? And among them, which was your favorite to write?
Well, I wrote a couple nonfiction books, but then I decided when I was getting close to retiring, I had this nasty habit of getting up at 4 a.m. to study and then also to write journal articles and different things. And so I tried to sleep in, but it just wasn't happening. When you get older, you don't sleep as much. So, I thought about it, and I really wanted to write this one particular story. I'd followed, some time travel books, and I'd also read some books about that were very close to real history, starting with The Physician by Noah Gordon, and then that was a trilogy, and then his second book took place kind of in the time period that I liked, which was the time of the Westerns, because I grew up in the 50s in America. And, we all watched those Westerns. They were so popular, the Gunsmoke and Rawhide and Bonanza, all those ones. And so I thought about it, and I thought I would love to write about somebody that with the perspective of uh, a modern person going back there, because as much as we all like to remember it happily, of course you're too young, but the times weren't that great considering modern values. Like, these guys were misogynistic like you would not believe.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yet, and there was nothing about, they would spank people. I mean, come on. And
Yeah, not the greatest
yeah,
thing to deal
yeah,
with.
those kind of things. And also, they weren't very nice to people of other cultures. They would be kind of patronizing a little bit, so, but they were so charismatic. And I wanted to be with them and ride with them, because in the 50s I didn't know any better. And so that's kind of my interest. So I lived in Australia, and I was practicing there, and they only had a couple different Westerns on that were old but modernized. And I got to see Bonanza in color. Oh my God, it was actually in color, because as a kid, it was all black and white. So I became fascinated with it. And I decided that I would write about those characters in that setting. And I got tentative permission, but they never really followed through. And I finally gave up. And I knew what I could do, because they told me, is that I could use those characters but change the names. So I did.
Okay.
So that's where that came from. And so, of all the books that I've written, though, the last book that I published was my favorite. And that's a book called A Man's Worth. And that's about an aging veterinarian who describes his life and all the things that he went through. But my favorite kind of all-time long one is, of course, The Travels of Dr. Rebecca Harper, because that was really the first fiction book I wrote. And that was the most, like, I can't explain the feeling that you get when you send a couple chapters to somebody who is a true critic, like your sister or your mother or somebody like that, who is not going to pull punches, who just goes, oh my God, send me more. And, or like, it's been 3 days and I haven't received anything. And then I gave it to my staff. And of course, I was a veterinarian in Australia. So my staff were not as familiar. Well, I don't think any of them had ever watched Bonanza. They'd heard of it, but
Hmm.
they they just started to ask me about, well, what are you writing about? So I would send them, a chapter or two, and then they got just as hooked. So people all over the place got hooked, and that just, it took me over the edge, and it was like almost as good as saving a life on a horse.
Yeah.
And I knew I was going to retire. I was getting older. I was a time bomb because my reaction time was slower. And when you work with big horses, you got to be pretty quick. And so I pretty much set a date, extended it, extended it, extended it. And finally I said, okay, I'm going to be 70. So, and I said, that is enough. My dad was a horse vet. He retired, I think, in his mid 60s.
Okay.
And I had worked, all my life. And I just went, okay, I think I've really done enough for humanity. It's time to enjoy myself. And
Definitely.
so I started writing these books, and they just flowed. It was amazing. I would get up at 4 and I would write until the first emergency, or I had to check a sick horse that was out in the barn, or
Hmm.
my first call. And I could whip out enough that your average writer, a couple, maybe 3,000, 5,000 words in that time, because I didn't have a strict schedule. I didn't have a strict script. I'm a pantser. I write by the seat of my pants.
Hmm.
And I just sat down and took it where it went. And I had no idea when I started that book how it would end. I
Really?
really
So it was
didn't. I
like,
really, really didn't. I thought there are
okay.
so many options.
Okay, so like, so it was more like your writing process was almost like, I don't want to say making it up as you go, but it was like what was, did you have
No,
like
I
at
would
least
say
like,
it's making it up as I go. That's
yeah, you
exactly
would,
what it was.
okay, you would say
Yeah,
that. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
My gosh. Yeah. So,
yeah.
I mean, but like, so I feel like, so did you definitely have that for like the first book of the series? And then like for the sequel, did you have to like sort of make more of a layout, or was it still like writing it
Well,
as
the
you
second book,
go?
which actually just the first book, the one we're talking about, is uh, is is an Audible. And last night I just got a message to say that the second book in the series is also now on Audible as well. So the
Hmm.
second book was a bit of, I kind of thought of it a bit of a filler, but I had to. I don't want to say how things end or go or something like that, but I had to kind of. I knew that this was going to be, when I finished it. My family, friends, and some of my clients as well by then were reading it, and they're going, "Well, it can't end. You have to keep writing." And so it kind of started to be a filler, but important things happened during that time in the book that made it fit with what was going to come. There's 4 books in the series so far. I am now in the process. I haven't even started on the 5th book, but what I'm doing is marrying some another series together with it, because the protagonist in
Really?
the other series, which Books Go Social also is representing, was a classmate of Rebecca Harper. And so
Oh
she
my
didn't time
gosh.
travel. She did like what I did. She went to Australia and became a vet, and she retired, moved back here to the States, bought a cabin in the mountains, and then started to have adventures. So I wrote all these books before all these books were written, except for one of them were written while I was still practicing in Australia. And I had no idea what I was going to do, but gosh darn, I moved back to the United States. I bought a cabin in the mountains where I can fish right out of my place.
Have your own,
And
yeah, have your
so
own
everybody
adventures.
goes, "Oh, you wrote that because you knew you're doing it." I knew I was going to some place where I could fish, but
Yeah,
that's all.
gotta go somewhere. But do you mind if I ask you, so you said that the fifth book of the series would be a collaboration with,
It'll marry the two books and the two women together.
The two women
So
together.
so one
Gotcha.
is
Okay.
so they were classmates in veterinary school,
Gotcha.
and
Okay.
they one stayed in the United States. Well, if you read the book, it's pretty quick. You realize that Rebecca is in an accident and time travels back to the 1800s,
Right.
down
Yeah.
back in the area of Bonanza. It's not Bonanza, but it's there, that area.
Hmm.
And they copyrighted all their names and all that, but there were things they couldn't copyright, and they pretty much told me what they couldn't copyright. So
That's it. So you were like, yeah, I'm
ding.
taking that.
So yeah. So so but they were really good. They were really nice. And eventually we might have done a deal, but I wanted to move on. So I wrote this other series, and this woman moves back, and she's courted by two very interesting men. And keep in mind, this is like years later, and they're much older. So this is kind of goes to older people, but I have lots and lots of young people that like it as well. So
Hmm.
um but it fits kind of both, both groups. So I'll tell you who really loved it. This is really funny. When I moved back to the United States, I kind of rejoined the veterinary community, and I got all these old geezer, and I can say old geezer because I am an old geezer,
Yeah.
veterinarians, retired
Hmm.
veterinarians that love my books, and they're mostly males. And so it ticks that box too. So it's lots of fun. But they're going to marry up, but that's in the future, and I'm writing it right now.
Well, that's exciting because I was
Yeah.
actually going to ask you because I was wondering if the fourth book was the end, but it's good to know that
Well,
the
I
adventures will
had planned it to
continue.
be the end. Yeah, I planned it to
Hmm.
be, but I've
Okay.
met with resistance of my readers. So,
They
and in
wanted
fact,
more.
well, what's a little death threat, No,
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. No, I'm kidding. But they really, is it going to continue? Is it going to continue?
Hmm.
And so I thought of a way to make it continue, because I didn't want it to get too old. I will say the
Right.
third book is actually about Rebecca Harper's daughter. So Rebecca Harper was married. She had a 3-year-old daughter. She travels to Nevada to look at a veterinary practice near Lake Tahoe, and she's in a rock slide. And everybody in modern times thinks that she's dead. And including her husband and the 3-year-old daughter. Not that the I'm just going to click that off. Not that the not that the the 3-year-old daughter just hardly even remembers her. She doesn't. She's, her father remarried, but she ended up going to veterinary school as well. And she ended up moving through, well, I'm not going to explain. I don't want to give too much away, but she
Yeah.
eventually goes to that area and gets a lot of hints that possibly her mother isn't dead. And so
Okay.
through documentation, because um, the um, the premise that I had was that there was a reason that the Bonanza like um, characters and saga began, and that was because somebody went back in history and found these people. Found real people.
Yeah.
Real being, in quotations, of course.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's what's happening with that. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And I also speaking of the characters, I wanted to ask you, like it says in the book description that Dr. Harper encounters both nonfiction and fictional characters on her adventures, and I was just
Yeah.
wondering what are
Okay.
the real historical
Okay.
nonfiction
All
characters that
right.
she meets?
Okay. So Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. and Sr. are real people. Okay.
Okay.
And there was in the book The Physician, on the second book, I think he's mentioned in uh, in the history of medicine, basically, as being somebody who was actually quite prominent in starting modern hygiene, like things like, oh my God, let's wash our hands between patients and things like that, which are pretty simple
Hmm.
things, but it really wasn't practiced a lot.
Yeah,
And so,
I've seen that in
yeah,
like history books, and it's
yeah,
always like, oh, geez.
yeah. So, but he actually also was a poet. And then there, Elizabeth Blackwell. I just looked around and looked at history. Elizabeth Blackwell was probably considered the first American female surgeon or vet or physician. And so I fudged dates a little bit. And but basically it was during that time. And so I introduce her um, as somebody that helps Rebecca because she's a veterinarian, and as a veterinarian in old times, she's struggling to make a living, and yet she knows so much about modern medicine that people who are doctors recognize right away that she has skills that they don't even have and knowledge. Although she tries to keep it secret, she doesn't want to tell anybody that she's from the future. So,
Right.
so she eventually goes to medical school, and so she meets them, and then she meets the son, who is a young man when she first meets him, which is Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., who became the Supreme Court justice, head of the Supreme Court at one stage. He was a lawyer,
Okay.
and then there was another character. There was another group of people that it's really important to me personally because she travels to Sacramento. She's trying to find a way to get back to her present time. And she ends up going to a more populated area, and she eventually meets this family, the Merritts. And the Merritts are people that sell horses. And this is well before she goes to medical school.
Mm-hmm.
So the Merritts had this huge farm in near Woodland, California, which is near Sacramento. So she travels over there because she did get a job procuring animals, horses, and mules for mining, because this is in the time of the 1849 and the gold rush in California. So
Right.
she meets these people, and they happen to be my real great great grandparents. and and they
Oh
were
my
quite
God.
famous. I know, quite famous people in their time. And they had this
Wow.
gigantic home, and when my mom died, I inherited this book that had a picture of this home, and the picture of the home was in my grandmother's house for years and years, and my grandmother lived to be 100, so I saw that picture a lot. Anyway,
That's so
so
cool. You could literally
yeah,
put your own family
I
like
know. I
as these
did. Oh yeah.
important.
Oh,
That's
I put my
amazing.
family in, and I use friends' names. I mean, always
Oh
with
yeah,
permission.
yeah.
But I so that was really good. So I put them in, and other characters of the time, but I also put some um fictional people in as well, from movies and from like the True Grit character Rooster
Yeah.
Cogburn. I slept him in, whether it's legal or not, I don't know,
Yeah.
but I'll throw it in.
Just
There's
a
only a couple
just like a little
sentences,
message.
but anyway, so I'm having a great time doing that and adding people that are a lot of fun. In the final book, I have a friend who's a veterinarian, and she wanted to be in the book, and she's quite
Okay.
famous. She's a professor at University of Illinois in veterinary medicine, and I was supposed to meet her in Australia. She was coming over to give some lectures, and I at the last minute I couldn't come, and so I went, "How am I going to make this up?" And she said, "I want to be a character in your book." And I went, "Okay." And she goes, I said, "So what do you want to be?" And she goes, "I want to be a floozy with a heart of gold." And so
She
she
definitely thought this
basically,
out before.
yeah, well, I don't know. Anyway, so so I wrote her in as a kind of a barmaid who possibly had other financial interests in life. I never really do say,
Yeah.
but she's also a silent patron of the town. And it turns out that there was a real woman in the town of Virginia City where most of this was filmed, and where most of the bonanza was filmed, and my story takes place, named Julia Brulette, I think her name is. And
Okay.
she was a real person. And she was exactly that. She was a floozy with a heart of gold. and she financially kind of helped the town with philanthropic needs, like I think the orphanage and just lots of different things.
Okay.
So anyway, and then also my character meets Mark Twain, and there's all kinds of people. So it's a lot of fun.
That, yeah, that does sound
Yeah,
like really cool because it's like a
yeah,
blend of like fictional characters, but also like you
yeah,
sprinkle in some non-fictional characters. So readers are like,
yeah,
oh my gosh, there's Mark
yeah,
Twain. Like
yeah,
there's, and
yeah.
like also I like that you put in other historical figures that are, I guess, like at least to me, not as well known because I did not
Oh
know about
no, they
that
are not
woman
at
who was
all.
the first
Yeah,
surgeon. And like it
yeah,
definitely helps readers to
yeah,
discover these more like lesser known
yeah,
people in
yeah,
history, which I really appreciate because I love
yeah.
learning more about history. So
Well,
yeah.
I some of them I knew about from other books that I had read, but
Hmm.
sometimes I would just stop and Google, like famous this at this time,
Hmm.
um, and that's how I came across these people. Um, but a lot of them are just stuff I made up. It had to fit. It had to fit the plot, and of course, the plot
Right.
could change day to day. I didn't know when I started it, I didn't know whether she was going to stay or go for sure. I didn't
Hmm.
know whether she could find the portal and if she could, and how she was going to find the portal. But one of the things that I did, which I think is so clever, I am
Yeah.
so clever. I'm just kidding. But I did, this is, to me, it was a really good plot idea, was
Hmm.
that she was deathly afraid of telling anybody she was from the future, and because she was concerned about that she would be thought crazy and institutionalized or hung or something.
Or like because like
So
hysteria, yeah, because
yeah,
they,
exactly.
yeah.
Well, wouldn't you? Anyway, um so she eventually realizes, she hears somebody singing music, the Beatles, and she goes,
No, the
there is
Beatles.
somebody, but she's in a huge crowd. She can't find that person.
Hmm.
So that's a big kind of a plot twist, was the hearing music from the future.
That is that is really clever. I like
Yeah,
that
just the
because
tunes, not the words, just the tunes.
mhm.
But I want to hold your hand.
Yeah, oh
Yeah.
my,
I
that's
mean,
really
that would
clever.
not be
Yeah.
popular in the 1800s.
Yeah, no, and it's like a
Yeah,
very subtle way as to
yeah,
hinting like, because like everyone else like in the past, like they wouldn't think that as weird. Like they would just think like,
yeah.
oh, it's just like another song. But like somebody who knew the Beatles, they'd be like, oh my gosh.
I know.
So I really like that. Yeah, pat
Yeah,
yourself on the back for that. I really like
yeah. I do all the time,
that. So
and then
I
I sing the
oh
songs to
yeah.
myself.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean,
Yeah,
honestly, like if you're gonna put a catchy tune like
yeah,
that in the book, I would be humming along with it too. I'd be
yeah,
like, yeah. But I want to ask you, along with there was another thing in the book description. It notes that fans of the book Outlander would enjoy this book,
yeah,
and like
yeah.
both Outlander and your stories both center on a woman who accidentally like travels
Time
back in
travels. Yeah,
time. Yeah, like
yeah.
travels like back in
Yeah, and
time. And I was just
she goes backward and forward too. Well,
okay.
pretty quickly it's these kind of Stonehenge kind of rocks that send her backward and forward. And I did read, well, I think I've read all but the very last one.
Okay.
And I really I just absolutely loved them. Different era, and kind of different, obviously, um just different than mine. I keep mine kind of clean, like, not that I didn't enjoy Outlander's areas where they weren't quite as, pristine,
Hmm.
or I don't know what to say. But
Yeah.
but I used to say to people, no, I am not going to write about that kind of stuff. My 90-year-old dean reads my books. And
Yeah, you don't
so,
wanna
nah,
you don't wanna
anyway,
put that stuff.
yeah. So he's passed, but still, there's other my sisters. They really would not be happy if I started putting stuff in like that. So anyway,
Hmm.
not that I don't like it, not that I don't think about it, but it's just not my genre. And the
Gotcha.
other thing
Yeah.
that is different about my books that can be somewhat is that she really goes into just tons and tons of description. And I think that's kind of why I've fallen off loving her books, because there's too much description and not enough action. And I keep my descriptions to a minimum and actions to the max. And so we're different in that way. Not to say, she's famous, her genre is incredible. She made time travel way more popular than probably anybody else. But anyway, mine are just a little bit different than hers.
And also
Yeah.
it just goes down to like different preferences too, because I know
Yeah.
sometimes personally, like if a book has a lot of description or spends a bunch of
Yeah.
its like page or
Yeah.
word count with descriptions,
Yeah.
I find it to be more of like a slower read, whereas a book with like a bit more action,
Yeah.
uh, intermingled with a description,
Yeah.
I really
Yeah.
enjoy. But it's really just
Yeah.
like based on like preferences and whatnot. But I do understand like though, like
Yeah.
having to do with all those descriptions, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, this is great, but like what's going to
Yeah.
happen? So I can
Yeah.
understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm much more, you are never going to have a page of description from me. You might have a couple sentences, period, and that would be it. So,
Okay. Good to know.
yeah,
But so I actually wanted to ask you,
you can ask me.
well, it was kind of like a funny question, but what's harder, giving a horse a checkup or writing a novel?
Well, these days the horse would be harder, but um, no, I think, when you've worked, like I worked well over 50 years in the industry. Now,
Hmm.
I only worked 37 years as a vet, but I was a vet tech and an anesthesia tech at 3 different veterinary schools. I worked for my father. You name it, I've done it. It really, it was second nature, and it was the joy of my life. Pinch me, they're paying me to do this. That
Yeah.
was always my motto. I loved every minute of what I did until I started writing. And then that was it. I went, I love it, but I think I'd rather be writing. And
Rather be writing.
so,
Yeah.
and the writing just became my second obsession. Um, I, so these days, writing is much easier. Well, it was just fun right from the beginning, because I I wrote about stories that I wanted to be in, or had, great knowledge of, and or I fell in love with my characters. Well, I fell in love with a lot of the horses. I can remember there's a book out right now called Hello Beautiful that everybody's talking about. I don't even know what it's about yet, but I know I see it. And there was a horse that came to me that was dying, and her name was Hello Beautiful. And I get emotional just talking about this.
Yeah.
I fell in love with this horse, and she reignited my love of horses. And that sustained me for the last 15 years of practice. I just never looked at a horse again and couldn't find something endearing about that animal.
Yeah.
Oh, there was a couple, but
Yeah.
but nah, it just was. My life was so blessed, and it still is. It's so blessed. I love being a vet. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. But I knew that at some point, I just saw so many of my colleagues as they got older, start to, get injured and things. And I came out of it really unscathed. Unlike most of the vets I know, I'm pretty,
Mhm.
so far I haven't had any joint replacements, and I go out and I go fly fishing every day,
Yeah,
and
that's
I
good.
walk, and in the summer I ride with a friend. Finally starting to look to maybe get a horse myself. Um,
That would be
but
great.
yeah, I know, I kind of miss it. So life is so good. I'm so lucky. I'm just absolutely blessed. And if I didn't love what I did, I'd find something that I did love, because there is no way I'm not going to enjoy my life right till the time, you know, hopefully till it's over. But we'll see.
Mhm. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it really does sound like you
Yeah.
have like a very exciting and just like very fun-filled life. Like I'm a bit jealous, honestly, I gotta say. So yeah, because
Yeah.
it sounds like you've accomplished so much too, and also right now,
Yeah.
like you're doing so much, like you're writing these novels and everything. So it's very
Yeah, well, I'm
admirable.
still writing veterinary stuff too. So I'm writing a chapter in a book about burns in horses because I have quite a bit of experience that,
Oh,
Australia, we had
okay.
these huge fires and we had all these
Mm.
horses that were burned. And so we learned how to economically take care of them. It's fine to have, take them to a veterinary educational, school or something like that, where there's, money's not the object, but I didn't live in a highly economically affluent area, and plus my friends and clients and my staff who lost horses or had horses injured,
Hmm.
um, they lost everything. They didn't just lose their horse, or their horse didn't just get burned. They lost their house. They lost everything. So we had to
Oh,
learn how to do
yeah.
it economically, and we really did. And it was one of the best things that I ever did. But it was also one of the worst. I had post traumatic stress after it, and it was
Yeah.
very difficult. So, but I learned so much from that, and I've been asked to write a chapter in a book for veterinarians, and so I still do. I dabble a bit. Um,
Hmm.
I'm really passionate about teaching. This weekend I'm going to be on a Zoom with a bunch of young vets that are struggling with all the issues of modern day practice, and just sit. My problem might not even say a word, but I have so
Hmm.
many coping mechanisms to get through
Right.
life. I mean, I'm in a strange country, Australia. I don't know anybody. The veterinary community wasn't exactly like, yeah, come on. They were
Yeah,
kind of
it
like,
was.
they were turf guarding,
Oh
and it's
no.
normal. I mean, we all did it. So, um, I didn't have any friends. I didn't know anybody there. I had a um, guy that I was going to marry. I mean, I was madly in love, which got me through some of it. But um, anyway, life is very hard for veterinarians right now, very, very challenging. And so I try to mentor as much as I can.
Yeah, and I'm sure like the younger veterinarians will like very much appreciate it because I know you'll definitely have some great advice for them, especially because when you were talking about writing the chapter of treating burns for horses, like I've seen like getting a little bit off topic here, but I've like seen like some veterinary shows where like they're like taking care of horses and like that's like I've never really seen them treat horses for burns because
It doesn't
it
come
doesn't
up
really
that
it
often.
doesn't come
Yeah.
up. It doesn't like it you don't really see that
Yeah.
issue with horses. So I think feel like
Yeah.
that will be very
Well,
beneficial.
that was one of the reasons that I wrote a paper about this when it was
Hmm.
over. And one of my colleagues, who's a very, very famous veterinarian in California, Dr. John Madigan, I call
Hmm.
him Dr. Disaster because that's what he's done for years. He's done a lot of rescue stuff. And
Okay.
I called him and I said, "What the heck am I going to do with these horses?" And he goes, and because it looked like their feet were falling off, and
Ooh.
yet they didn't act like their feet were falling off, but it was like
Hmm.
around their coronary band it was separating out, and it was looked like a disaster. The last thing I
Yeah.
wanted to do was treat horses and then have their foot fall off. Let's get it over with quicker. But
Right.
he said, well, I don't know. He said, but keep records and write about it because we don't know. So I did, and I published it, and it turned out to be an extremely popular publication. And so I know a lot about it, and I started lecturing at veterinary schools and different places around and stuff. Um, so yeah, I've got quite a bit of experience. But what I liked about my practice was it wasn't, we were economically challenged in the area. And so we learned how to do things um,
Hmm.
economically expediently.
Yeah.
We learned to do without, and we just did what we did, and we had such appreciative clients because their options were so limited. There was some fantastic veterinarians in there, but veterinary medicine is not, it's not a cheap thing anymore. And so it's not like I wasn't trying to be cheap. I was just trying to be practical.
Right.
So anyway, yeah, great life.
Yeah, yeah, great. And I was actually going to ask you, since you definitely have had experience, like, giving advice to aspiring veterinarians or like young veterinarians, I wanted to ask you, as we're like getting as like a final question, do you have any advice for aspiring authors or any like newer authors that you would like to share?
Well, yeah, I do. I think first of all is that just write your story. And like I meet so many people that have been working on their story for 10 years. I belong to a lot of writers groups. I live in North Georgia in the mountains, and so history and arts, including literary arts, are very, very popular here. And so there's lots of would-be writers. Um, I think people agonize about their stories. And like I'm trying to write it. There's a woman that came up to me at a function that I was at and said she heard that I had learned how to do something, and so she asked me about it, and she said, "I've got cancer, it's terminal, and I've been writing my story for 10 years." And I'm going, "How can I help you get this published?" And
Yeah.
we're going to work together. So, um, but write it down, get it done. Thinking about it is okay, but just start something, and then um, for goodness sakes, get an editor. And then when you think you're done with that editor, get a second opinion, because editing is so, so important. It's so important. And as I've basically had to become re-educated with English and the written language and the Oxford comma, which I'd never heard of before, and all those kind of things that that are kind of important. But you know what? You don't have to write your book in the exactly correct English literature kind of paradigm. You can write it out of that, but make sure you've got great dialogue if you're going to use dialogue. Don't 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 write like you would write for an English paper. Write like you would speak. Those kind of things. um
Okay.
don't. Yeah, I make sure that if I see I am going, I'm going to write I'm going. There's no way I'm going to write I am if I'm
Yeah.
saying it. I might say it another way, but
Mhm.
I basically I do that. I use a Microsoft Word, and I found I think it's Microsoft Emma reads me my books, and this is
Okay.
an immersive voice. And honestly, I could she could do my Audible. She's so good.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So every time I write the word doc, like so doc, and if there's a period at the end, she always says document. I can't get her to stop doing that, so that's driving me nuts.
Document.
But yeah, document. But other than that, she's flawless. And boy, does she catch me up. She has made me humble.
Because like so like you kind of use her to help like because it's
She
different like reading over the paragraph
Yeah.
or like
Oh yeah,
when you're
reading
writing.
over. Okay, well here's a clue. Here's
Mhm.
another. This is another excuse to take away from you. I have dyslexia. And so what I write
Mhm.
is what I write may not be what I'm thinking, and
Gotcha.
it may not, and it depends. Some days I'm really bad, some days I'm not too bad. And I can tell
Hmm.
you right now, like this morning, I'm having a dyslexic day, because
Just
I would write
okay.
the word and I would write ADN time and time again.
Oh, hmm.
So Emma sorts that out for me. But
Okay,
on
yeah, that's
top of
good.
Emma, I've got a woman up in Kentucky that helps me, and then I've got a second proofreader that reads it, and my friends are really good too. I've met a new woman here in I live in Ellijay, Georgia, and she's really good at it. And so I said, "Hey, you want a job?" So
Want
I'm
to help me
writing.
out?
I well, I started to write a Kindle Vella, and I've just published it, started it, and it's about a horseback because that's what I write about. Um,
Hmm.
and and so she gets on it and she goes, "You forgot to do this," and so like I can go in and edit it right away, but I edited this thing 20 times before I published it, and she still caught something. So, um, anyway, so, phone a friend, get writing. Don't let the English language ruin your story. Do good dialogue and get an editor.
All
I guess
right.
those are my
Awesome.
things. And
Yeah.
sitting around waiting 10 years to find a publisher. Well, if you don't want to do any kind of personal, if you don't want to do any personal advertising, and trust me, as a veterinarian, I never advertise. I just use my good deeds and a Facebook to promote myself. But and I'm a little shy of doing a lot of stuff other than podcasts. I love podcasts. Anybody who wants a podcast, I'm here for you. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Podcasts are fun. I like them too.
yeah. But I think, waiting around 10 years to find a publisher when you could get a book out, and maybe someday I'll want to publish. In fact, I'm kind of thinking long and hard about it. Because I've got other books in my brain. I got tons of books in my brain. I live alone. And so everybody goes, how do you come up with this? I said, well, I live alone. And I said, so I only talk to myself. So
Yeah.
I
Gotta fill the silence somehow. Yeah.
I think about plots all the time. So, and different ones, and, funny things that happen that make me think this would be a pretty funny story.
Yeah.
So,
What if I wrote that?
yeah. Well, my Kindle Vella came about because it's called Hey Xander. I couldn't use the word Siri. I talked to them about it and they said no. So I changed the name Siri to Xander, Alexander Graham Bell. And basically it's Xander goes out of his little paradigm and starts giving the veterinarian advice, both in veterinary medicine and in her personal life, and they have these conversations, and it's a lot of fun. So, that was just crazy, and I thought of it.
Yeah, I mean, that does sound like a really fun plot. Yeah. So it's just like you just keep thinking about these plots, and like, do you ever just write them down, or do you just like?
No, I just I have to read. Sometimes I forget, but usually once I've thought about something, it'll be in the back of my brain. And it'll pop up again. And then finally, like, I wrote the first thing in just a few days, but I sat on it for a really long time. And then I went to a writing group and they asked me to read a bit of it. And I did. And they went, oh my God, that is so funny. Oh, that is so, and I went, okay, I'm going to get this sucker out now.
Yeah, I got to get it out now. Can we get more people to read it?
So, gotcha. And they were non-vet people. So like,
okay.
It was to have them say that is so cool. I was really,
it's definitely good to gain like a different perspective on it. So yeah.
But most of my books are pretty, there's not too much kind of stuff. It's mostly, a little time travel aside, but gosh, that's real.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for providing this very helpful advice to our listener, and thank you so much for making the time for this interview. I definitely had a lot of fun, getting more in-depth information on these books and just like finding out about your process. So thank you so much for that.
And well, thanks for having me, and I look forward to seeing what you do in life. I'm like, let's get going here. Let these excuses of I'm working and going to school and I'm young and I'm probably dating and all that, get rid of it. Just start writing.
Just start writing. I have
do all the other things. It's experiences that give you this, that give you these, help you to write. It's experiences. I couldn't have written these stories when I first started as a vet. I mean, I couldn't even think of these things. So
you're right. It takes like time and experience to really get the ideas.
It does. But by the same token, in your brain, you probably have young people ideas that you're ready to go with. So we'll
have to see if I can get them on the page.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. That was Elizabeth Woolsey, and all her books are currently available on Amazon. Be sure to check out Book Talk's other author interviews, which are available on both Spotify and Apple Podcasts.